Good morning, and welcome to worship live stream, Kingsgate Community Church, Great Yarmouth. I want to welcome my brothers and sisters that meet regularly here, but not at the moment. I want to welcome anybody from the borough who might be joining us for this live stream this morning, and anybody from further afield. I just trust that you'll be encouraged and blessed and helped by the message this morning, but a very warm welcome to you all. This morning was due to be a break from our sermon series in Mark, but I've decided to go back and take us back into Mark. 3 weeks ago I preached a message entitled Jesus First Team, which you'll see on the chart behind. By the way, I brought a friend with me this morning. His name is Pt.2. And he'll be involved a little bit this morning. But I'm going to take us back to Jesus First Team, and this will be known as Part 2. If you missed Part 1, and as a result this morning you'd like to hear that, it is still available, I believe, on YouTube. If you're unable to sleep at night, that might help you, but it is still available for you there. But just as we come into the sermon this morning, I'm going to read a few verses again from Mark chapter 3. If you'd like to follow in your Bibles, on your phone, on your tablets, I'm going to read from Mark chapter 3, just a few verses beginning at verse 13. And this is what it says. Jesus went up on a mountainside and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12 that they might be with him, and that he might send them out to preach and to have authority to drive out demons. These are the 12 he appointed: Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter; James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. To them he gave the name Boanerges, which means sons of thunder; Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Just want to recap from 3 weeks ago very, very briefly and very quickly before we move on to this morning. Jesus has called the 12, we call them apostles, we call them disciples, the first disciples. He called them, and he called them primarily to be with him. First and foremost, to be with him before they had tried to achieve anything for him. And that's a really good principle for us to follow. Spending time with Jesus ahead of going out and speaking and acting for him. I do need to apologise because it was remiss of me last time in regard to this whole aspect of spending time, taking time with Jesus. I encouraged us all that one very good way of doing that is by reading the Bible, and not just reading the bits that are familiar, the bits that are nice, but actually reading through the Bible from cover to cover. And 3 weeks ago, I should have said, and I do appreciate and understand that for some people, reading is a genuine difficulty and a genuine issue. And if that's the case, and so 3 weeks ago you said, that's okay, Paul, I just can't take you up on reading the Bible through this year because reading is an issue. Here's the good thing. The Bible is readily available as an audio version, and it is extremely helpful. There was a time, particularly when I used the audio version of the Bible, and I would listen in, and the guy who was reading on my behalf and I would follow was David Suchet, who we will know as Hercule Poirot. And so why wouldn't you want somebody of that caliber reading the Bible for you? So just at the beginning, I want to say to all those that reading is an issue, please don't let that put you off, because the audio version is readily available to you. And this reading of the Bible is a real way, not the only way, but a real way of spending time with Jesus. So here we go. We're going on to part 2 of the message right now. So we're looking at Jesus' first team. Nobody at the moment could justifiably say there is too much sport on the television. Some of us will be saying there's not enough or there's none at all. But for those of us who are struggling and are suffering from an amount of withdrawal symptoms from sport in all its array this morning, I will be using during the message various illustrations from sporting examples. Now, some of you will have just now switched off. Please switch back on, because I'm hoping that the illustrations that I use will actually help as we try and get a grasp of some really biblical truth and principles. Anyway, so these are the 12. We've read the 12, the names of the 12. And I imagine that they would have been viewed, certainly by others around them, as something quite special. Must have been really special to be given this awesome responsibility from Jesus to go out to preach and to heal. So let's just take a look at these first 12 disciples, apostles, and see what we can learn from them. So here's the team for you. Here's the 12. So what do we got? We've got Simon Peter, James, John, Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Levi, which is another name for Matthew, Thomas, another James, Thaddeus, another Simon, and Judas. And I did try and put them in some kind of order that I felt they would be good and well placed in a particular part of the pitch for a football game, but that's not relevant. That's not relevant at all. I wanted to put these guys up there for you to see what Jesus' first team really did look like. And as we go through, you will know, if you have any grasp of the New Testament particularly, that there's far more information on some of these characters and names than there are on some of the others. And I would imagine that that's probably true of most, if not all, teams. In teams, you would tend to find the superstars, and then you find the rest of us. But let's just take a look. Let's just take a look at some of these characters and some of their character traits and see if their character traits and the way that they lived and acted and responded ring true in your life, and see if we can help as we go through to see how we can most best use that as servants and followers of Jesus. Okay, here's the character trait that I want to kick off with. Speaking without engaging your brain. Now, the guy above all the other original 12 who had this down to a fine art, and he had it down to perfection, was Peter, who Jesus gave the name Simon Peter. We can read in the Gospels, there are occasions where Simon Peter would say stuff, and I imagine that after he'd have thought, oh, maybe I should have thought before I actually said that. But one thing that could never be thrown at Simon Peter was that he wasn't enthusiastic. He was such an enthusiastic guy, and that's possibly why sometimes he acted before he thought. He moved forward, but not necessarily in the right gear, and that occasionally would cause a stall. But that's Simon Peter. That's the way he was. He was always up front. He was the one who said in the Gospels, Lord, I'll never leave you. I'll always be by your side. I'll always be there. I'll be the reliable one. I'll never let you down. And as we come to the end of the Gospels, leading up to the crucifixion of Jesus during his time of trial, we read these words from the mouth of Peter, I don't know the man. I don't know the man. And here was this man who throughout the previous 3 years had said, I'm for you, Lord. I'll be there. You can rely on me. I wonder if that's partly your experience. Maybe you started well. Great intentions. Sincere, real intentions. And yet something has happened that has really brought you down. Because that's what happened to Simon Peter. We read further on in the Gospels that when he'd said, I never knew the man, there came a point where this realization grasped him and it caused him to weep. Here was a big burly fisherman and it caused him to weep. Speaking without engaging the brain. That was a trait of one of the disciples. There was another guy, Matthew, also known by the name of Levi. He was a bit dodgy when it came to money. He was the tax collector and he worked for the occupying Romans. I put him in goal because I thought he was a safe pair of hands, but now I'm not completely convinced. But he would demand more tax than was necessary from the man on the street. He put everybody in the super tax bracket and then pocketed some of the proceeds. As long as number one was okay, the means didn't matter. A disciple of Jesus like that? Yeah, but sometimes we can put number one first. And that was a character trait of one of Jesus' first team. There was another couple, brothers, James and John. I've deliberately kept them apart. I put one in midfield and one up front. These two men had the name, or got the nickname, Thunder Brothers, not Thunderbirds. They went by the name of Thunder Brothers. They never backed down from an argument. In fact, they considered it a sport in its own right. They were of a very fiery disposition. Know anybody like this? Know anybody who's up for an argument, won't step down from it, even if they know deep down they're wrong? To your face, they have to remain right. Would you call yourself a thunder brother or a thunder sister, if you're honest? I want you to be really honest right at this moment in time, as I try and lean closer into your living rooms. Does this ring true for you? Church, Kingsgate Community Church, Great Yarmouth. I want you to be ruthlessly honest at this point. And put your hand up if you need to admit that this is one of your traits. I can't let things go. I have to be right. I'm always up for a fight. I can see no hands. There should be some hands going up. But seriously, this was a trait of the first disciples of Jesus. They were up for an argument and they loved it. Then what about Thomas? Well, Thomas I put way back in defence. I put him on the left side of the fence, out of the way. Many people will know that Thomas also was known by the term of doubting Thomas. For Thomas, seeing was believing. And I wonder if Thomas may well have been the most honest of the 12. You see, I do believe that he believed, but in the course of his time with Jesus, he had become bruised. The very man that he'd spent 3 years with was suddenly taken to an unjust trial, to a cruel cross, and died a criminal's death. And afterwards, when some of the disciples saw the resurrected Jesus and he wasn't there, he wouldn't believe it. I need to see it to believe it. That the great hope in my life has been dashed. The man I staked my life on is no longer here. I won't believe it. I can't believe it. I want to believe it, but I need to see it. Does that fit you? For you? Seeing is believing. We've got Simon the Zealot, the political activist. Simon, I've called him here Simon Zeal, and he'd be good up front. Probably more accurate translation of his name is Simon the Keen. Not Roy Keane, but Simon Keen. Well, whatever it was, he was undoubtedly serious in his personal convictions and had gained a reputation as a result of those convictions. And he didn't mind being involved with a bit of rebellion. Just because the Romans said it didn't mean it was true. Just because the Romans said it didn't mean that he would do it. No, he was of a more independent spirit, and he would go against the grain. He was zealous. He was up for a bit of rebellion. What about you? Are you up for a bit of rebellion? Do you know deep within your heart, like me, that there's a rebellious edge there? And not just to the likes of the Romans, the occupying force, but even a rebellious spirit of not letting Jesus be Jesus in my life. Sound familiar? What about Judas Iscariot? I'll do it for a price. Judas Iscariot. If you notice where he is on the team, he's actually not in the team. He's on the wrong side of the pitch. Here was a man who I wonder if suffered an awful lot during his 3 years with Jesus. Suffered in silence, possibly, because when he saw who Jesus was and what he did and what he said, he just couldn't take it. And ultimately, it led to his betraying Jesus, to selling him short, taking 30 pieces of silver as a way of handing him over to the authorities. He was also known as Simon the Dagger Man. He was always there, just a prod here, a prod there, undermining, not being on board. That was Judas Iscariot. Well, there were still 5. There was Andrew. He was Simon Peter's brother, and that must have been quite a burden in itself. Fancy having a brother like Simon Peter. But Andrew was the very man that brought Peter to meet Jesus first time. There's Philip. Similarly, he told a guy called Nathaniel all about Jesus. Bartholomew, he was a man present and actually saw with his own eyes the resurrected Jesus. There was James. I've called him James Alpha. Alpha, he's on the left side of midfield. He also went by the name of James the Less, James the Younger, and James the Small. So in football terms, he could have been known as James Not More. He could have been known as James Young. Could have been known as James Small. But the inference there is he was just a little guy. Little guy. My late mum would often tell me that the best things come in small packages. And that might have just been who James, the son of Alphaeus was. He was just a little guy, but he was in the team. And there's Thaddeus. Very little is known of Thaddeus, but he made up the team. So take a final look before it goes of Jesus' first team. With the benefit of hindsight, Jesus, wasn't your selection a big mistake? When we look back and see all the mistakes and the flaws in these men that you called first and foremost to be with you, couldn't you have done a bit better? You see, I believe amongst the 12, there was a really good mix of the introvert, the extrovert, and a word I've recently learned, the ambivert, which is someone who's neither introvert or extrovert, but somewhere in the middle. And that tends to be also the makeup of most good teams. It's made up of the introvert, the extrovert, and the ambivert. Now that's good as long as everybody in the team appreciates and is aware of and cares for the other members of the team with all their various idiosyncrasies and their God-given gifts and talents. That was the makeup of Team 1. Kingsgate. We are already a large team, and we're getting larger. You will see on your screen just now pop up, it's the front cover of a book. I don't know whether you'll be able to exactly read the front cover of the book, but it's called You've Got to Have WA. You've Got to Have WA. Written by an American called Robert Whiting, who during the 1980s studied Japanese baseball. I never realized that baseball in Japan is huge. So is cycle racing. But baseball is huge. It's a way of life in Japan. And this is something that Robert Whiting said in his book, You've Got to Have WA. Unlike the Americans who prize individuality, the Japanese revere the team. And the concept of WA means group harmony. That was the major difference that this author saw in baseball in the States and baseball in Japan. In Japan, you've got to have WA. You've got to have this desire for group harmony. And I think that can be very well applied to the Church of Jesus Christ. We need to have a bit more WA amongst us. And another illustration, reading recently of a guy goes by the name of Frank Dick. He's the former head coach of UK athletics. You will see on your screen above the first team 4 points that this former head coach of the UK athletics would drum into the athletics teams that he would train and that he would lead. Because he was fully aware that there was a fear factor in being part of a team. And he broke it down into 4 areas. First of all, the fear of getting it wrong or making a mistake. Nobody in a team wants to be the one that gets it wrong, that makes a mistake. Fear number 2, fear of losing. Anybody as an athlete, anybody in any sport, if they're going to be top of their game, they need to want to win. Thirdly, a fear of rejection. In a team, if you are or you become the weak link, you fear that you're going to be sidelined. You're going to be rejected by the other members of the team. And he said also, the 4th fear of being in a team is this, fear of criticism, also known in this context as fear of feedback, of other people in the team telling you what you're like, your strengths, your character traits, and your weaknesses. And I admit that I believe that in team there is this fear element, because it's a big risk being in a team. If you're a lone ranger, you've only got yourself to worry about. In team, you have a responsibility, you have a part to play, you have a position on the pitch. And throughout the generations, this has been the way that Jesus has wanted it for his disciples. He has wanted his disciples to be crafted around the concept of his first team. So in conclusion, I just want to say one thing more about Judas. I remember during my theological training, we would spend an inordinate amount of hours wasting our time discussing how fair it was on Judas, should Jesus ever have chosen him, and it was a waste of time. We don't know the answers to that. But let me just emphasize again, what you don't want to be is on the wrong side of the pitch. You need to be on the team. So Jesus' first team. I don't know if you can see what I've done there, but when Jesus' first team appeared first on the screen, it wasn't an apostrophe. The squiggle was up there, and I've moved it because I believe you can interpret the title of this message in three ways. First of all, you could consider it Jesus' first team, his initial team, the first 12. You could interpret it as his best team, the best 12 around. But then again, if you can see what I've done, it was Jesus' first team. But you can also interpret it this way, and this is why I want to leave with you. Jesus' first team. Jesus' first team. And I just need to take a moment of your time just to wonder of the glory of what I've managed to do there. It took me 5 attempts to get my GCSE English O-level. And for all my senior school teachers, they would never have had the wildest dream that I would be able to come up with something like that. But that's what I want to leave with you today. Jesus' first team is the model for us as team. There just needs to be a significant shift, and the shift being that the team needs to ensure that Jesus remains first. This is the way it needs to be for Team Kingsgate. This is the way it needs to be if we're to have any kind of godly influence in society, for any church member that's viewing and with us this morning from other churches. Jesus first, team. And it might require sometimes playing out of position. At the moment, all your games are home games. Just think about that for a second. All your games are home games. And it might well feel as though you're playing out of position. During this lockdown, you're almost being enforced to not be where you feel you're best used, can best perform. But in a sense, sometimes playing out of position is a good thing, because what it means is we're prepared to take on a space that's been vacated. We're prepared to go in that space. We're prepared for a period to play out of position. Don't worry about that. During all your home games, The important thing is not that you have to play for a period out of position, but it's a great opportunity for you to be in training. Training before you move back into your position of strength on the pitch in due course, because that time will come. But for now, keep on training. Keep in training, making much of Jesus from where you are. Thank you. Just as we close, you will find on your screen now an email address that you can contact if anything during this morning has grasped your attention specifically and you'd like help with it, clarification, prayer. Well, if you would like to email pastoral team at wearekingsgate.org for the next 28 minutes, I've gone over time, for the next 28 minutes, there'll be somebody waiting to either contact you by text, by email, or even by a phone call, just to be there for you and to pray for you. Please take that opportunity if you know that you're a team player, but that sometimes things haven't always gone well within the team for you. We look forward to seeing you next week. Take care and stay safe. Thank you.